on what happened here in the city of Cleveland with the Underground Railroad and how it affected us. This is Officer Jalil, IUIC Cleveland, and we're here at the Cozad Bates House in Cleveland, Ohio. This house is the only pre-Civil War house that is still standing today. And what you can see is we are standing near the Underground Railroad, and this is one of the homes that was a part of that culture and that network of people in the Underground Railroad that were helping our brothers and sisters who were escaping in order to get up to Canada. They would hide escaping slaves in a wagon of hay or vegetables when they transported their secret cargo to meet the next conductor on the way to Canada. You have the Ohio River here along the southern border of Ohio, and all of these routes that you see are different paths that the Underground Railroad took in Ohio. Now what's interesting is it said that Ohio had more Underground Railroad routes than all of the other northern states combined. Ohio was one of those states that prohibited slavery, but they passed specific laws. One of them was called the Black Laws. Hey, Shalom Israel, Most High Christ bless. This is Officer Jalil, IUIC Cleveland, and we're here at the Cozad Bates House in Cleveland, Ohio. This house is the only pre-Civil War house that is still standing today. And what you can see is we are standing near the Underground Railroad, and this is one of the homes that was a part of that culture and that network of people in the Underground Railroad that were helping our brothers and sisters who were escaping in order to get up to Canada. So we're here and we're getting a lot of history about our people and touching on what happened here in the city of Cleveland with the Underground Railroad and how it affected us. So a few things. So one, the U.S. Constitution, individual states were permitted to have slavery, but you can see that there were some states that were given the right to vote whether or not they would enslave or not. Ohio was one of those states that prohibited slavery, but they passed specific laws. One of them was called the Black Laws. The Black Laws were something that discouraged abolitionists and other people that were helping enslaved people that were escaping to Ohio. It discouraged them because they were penalized, or they could be jailed, or they could be fined heavily for helping anyone escape. Okay, so here in Ohio, right? So slavery was prohibited in the state of Ohio. However, Ohio passed something called the Black Laws. What the Black Laws did is it forced people that were black, wanted to be in the state of Ohio, you had to pay a $500 bond. Now just think about that. You're talking about the late 1800s, having to pay $500 just to enter into the state. Even today in 2025, a lot of people don't have $500 laying around for an emergency. So imagine how much more difficult that was financially at that time for someone to have to afford to pay this bond in order to enter the state. In addition, you had states surrounding Ohio like Virginia and Kentucky that still permitted slavery. But Ohio, although it was a so-called free state, they passed in 1850 what was called the Fugitive Slave Act, which meant that if there were any abolitionists, any men or women that were trying to help enslaved people, brothers and sisters that were trying to escape to Ohio to get up to Canada, up north, then what? They could be enslaved, they could be punished by large fines, they could have their property confiscated, and they could even be incarcerated or jailed as an activist for helping someone to escape or harboring what they call someone who was enslaved. So this discouraged people, or was meant to discourage people from helping those that were trying to get their way to freedom. So what we want to do is talk about that, and we get a couple scriptures to identify how that applies to us today. So let me get Psalm 94 verse 20. Because what you can see is, even though this was a quote unquote free state, there were still laws passed that restricted our people from having that true freedom. So we're gonna show how that applies to the scriptures today. Psalms 94 verse 20.
This is the book of Psalms, chapter 94 and verse 20. Shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law.
Which frameth mischief by a law. So think about that. Think about the mischief in this being a free state, but yet black laws were passed that required you to pay a $500 bond just so you can enter the state. That's mischief by a law. Let me get Habakkuk chapter 1 verse 4. Because then, as we mentioned, the second law, the 1850 fugitive slave law, this prohibited or discouraged those that were activists and abolitionists from helping our people. Read that.
This is the book of Habakkuk, chapter 1 and verse 4. Therefore, the law is slack.
So the law is slack. The law is not giving forth justice. It's not giving forth righteousness. It's not giving forth right doing, because the law is slacked. Read on.
And judgment doth never go forth.
And judgment never go forth, because even though this was a free state, there were laws that were placed that said, hey, if you were harboring somebody that was an enslaved person, you had to give them back to their captor. So this was not always a safe place to be for those people that were trying to escape up north. One of the nicknames they gave Cleveland's code name on the Underground Railroad was called Hope. That was the name our people used when they made it up to Cleveland or in this area, Hope. Why? Because they had hope that if they can make it here, that they would get closer to getting to Canada, right? Because once they got to Cleveland, they could get to Lake Erie and take that boat into Canada. So we want to touch on that, because obviously if someone made it this far, then they had hope. Even though they didn't see Canada, they may have never ever been to that place before, but they had a faith or a belief that that would give them true freedom. Let's read that.
This is the book of Hebrews, chapter 11 and verse 1. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for.
So faith is the substance of things hoped for. So when you have hope, that's faith. Something that you can't see, like our brothers and sisters who made it to Cleveland, they didn't see Canada yet, but they had hope based on what? Previous stories, experiences, and trials along the way, that if they could get here this far north, that they can make it across that water and hopefully get to Canada. Read on.
Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
So the evidence of things not seen. So that same hope that our brothers and sisters had once they arrived here, and they can make it up further north to get true freedom, or what they thought was freedom at the time, is the same hope that we have to have, and pushing forward to making sure we wake our brothers and sisters up to who they are as the true biblical Jews, the Israelites that the Bible speaks of. But this is just giving you more connection as to how the scriptures match up historically with what our people went through in the lands that we stay at today. Hey, shalom. So we're still at the Cozad Bates house. So the Cozad Bates family, along with the Ford family, were two families that were very close with each other in this area that is near the Underground Railroad. They also even intermarried with each other, and they helped a number of enslaved people who escaped and were looking for refuge up north, to help them with resources, hiding them, things of that nature, to make sure that they can have a safe escape. Now it says, when you read this second sentence, it says, they would hide escaping slaves in a wagon of hay or vegetables when they transported their secret cargo to meet the next conductor on the way to Canada. So a lot of times you're talking horse and buggy cargo, people on the way to Canada, they would be hiding people in the back of those buggies to see if they can help them to get closer to the north. But we got to understand that even with this help from people that are outside of our nation, there's still something that we have to always keep in mind, perspective, because we're still in the land of our captives to this day. Go ahead and read that.
This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 15 and verse 11. The Lord said, verily, it shall be well with thy remnant. Verily, I will cause the enemy to entreat thee well in the time of evil.
So this is the Lord giving us a little bit of respite in our captivity. I will cause the enemy to entreat thee well in the time of evil. Why? So our people can have a little bit of escape, a little bit of refuge, even though we were still in the land of our captivities to this day. So the enemy, the Lord put the spirit, oftentimes you'll see throughout history, on other nations to give our people some assistance, some help, and some hope in order to make this captivity a little bit more palatable. Keep reading.
And in the time of affliction.
And in the time of affliction, because we're talking about chattel slavery here, this is affliction. Our people were afflicted. Our people were forced against their own will, families separated, taken apart, escaping different southern states like Kentucky or Virginia, trying to make it up to Ohio and eventually get to Canada. But this was the Lord giving us a little rest in the time of that captivity. So you can see we have a map here of Ohio's Underground Railroad trails. So a couple interesting things, because you have the Ohio River here along the southern border of Ohio, and all of these routes that you see are different paths that the Underground Railroad took in Ohio. Now what's interesting is it said that Ohio had more Underground Railroad routes than all of the other northern states combined. In addition, 40% of enslaved men and women that tried to make their way up north to Canada went through Ohio. So very interesting. Also, along this route, so that name Ohio, it comes from the Seneca tribe of what we call North American Indians, which means Great River. But when you think about it, there are no Seneca tribes that have reservations here, and biblically speaking, that tribe would be part of what we call the tribe of Gad, right? Which is one of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. So this land was settled by them. The state's name was named after our brothers and sisters from the tribe of Gad, yet they don't have a foothold in that state today because there's no reservations, there's no land, and the people that they showed how to farm the land and how to cultivate it completely took it over. So let me get that in Obadiah verse 5. So I want to touch on that real quick just to show the depths of our enemies and what happens in modern times and how it applies to the scriptures. Go ahead.
This is the book of Obadiah, verse 5. If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night.
So Obadiah is speaking. If thieves came to thee, if someone came to steal something from you, or robbers, they came at night, what would they do?
How art thou cut off? How art thou cut off?
How art thou cut off? Read on.
Would they not have stolen till they had enough?
So most thieves, when they steal till they had enough. Meaning if you go to someone's house, you steal their food, you get your fill until your soul is satisfied. If you're taking grapes, you take enough until you're satisfied. But not this person. Read the next verse.
Verse 6. How are the things of Esau searched out?
So how are his things searched out? This is how you describe what type of thief he is. Because remember, the entire state of Ohio belonged to the tribe of Gad. So how are these things searched out to see why they have no ownership in the state today? Read on.
How are his hid things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border.
So the borders of Ohio, which were along the Ohio River, which with the Seneca tribe, which is part of the tribe of Gad name, now they don't have any stake in the land. So how are the things that Esau searched out? He doesn't steal till he has enough. He takes everything until it's completely gone. So this sign here we're looking at, This was assigned to fugitive slaves. It says posters warned runaways of the presence of nearby slave hunters in many communities that were active here in the Underground Railroad. So when you read this sign, right, it's got attention, slave hunter is among us, be on guard. Basically like a warning to those men and women that escaped this far north. But this just shows the climate, even in Ohio being a free state. You know, if you have Caucasians, you have people that are supposed to be activists, abolitionists, and you weren't familiar with this area, you don't know who was for you or against you. We're going to show you that in the scriptures. Read that.
This is the book of Sirach, chapter 12 and verse 10. Never trust thine enemy.
What does scripture say?
Never trust thine enemy.
So the Lord said we are to never trust our enemy. Read on.
For like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness.
So the Lord did give us, right? He put the spirit on certain people to help our brothers and sisters, but then there were a number of brothers and sisters, because we got to remember the state of Ohio, although it was a free state, it passed by one vote. So there were still a lot of advocates for slavery that when they got the opportunity or the chance, or if someone offered them money to send an enslaved person back to their captor, then they would definitely do that. So fugitive slaves, attention, slave hunters among us. It was because, yes, you had people that were helping, but you also had people disguised as the help. And so our brothers and sisters had to always be keen and aware that you can't trust everybody. So you got to remember that today as we apply that to our life.
What is a nation? Nation is family. Nation is community. Nation is men leading by example. Nation is women's support. Nation is children with role models. Nation is unity. Nation is you. It's nation time.
And finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord. His word